God, thanks Ben and Kate and Quick Crack Club and Cube for having me, because this is, are you all alright?
Yeah.
This is good, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's good doing, it's a bit weird, but it is good. But like, I think a bit weird but good is like my thing. It's my jam now. So I am going to tell you a story from Finland, which is where my mother is from, a lot of my family is from, and I love telling this story because I really love spending time in the Finnish landscape, and obviously haven't been able to do that in person kind of physically recently, so I like to do it in my mind. And before I start, is anybody here a bit Finnish or fully Finnish or Nordic? No? I just like checking. You are? Maybe? Yeah. I just like to check in case anybody's going to judge my pronunciation. Because the show is in Finnish. They did put that in the copy. Anyway, to help me get my Nordic on, to transport me to this place, I do want to do another little Finnish call and response with you. So when I say your, you say me. Your!
Me!
Your!
Me!
Your!
Me!
Your!
Me!
Your!
Me!
Tossie Hoover! So you just beat my mum and her best friend Raya on the phone when I was a child. And it's very funny to me and my dad, and that is kind of it, but it does happen. So in Finland, we have many forests, and we also have many lakes. And by the edge of one of these forests, and by the shore of one of these lakes, brother lived with sister. And it was just the two of them, because mother and father were dead. And so that was sad. But there was lots to be happy about, because they lived in the wooden mökki, the cottage that their mother and father had left to them, that their father's father and mother had left to him, that their father's father's father and mother had built piece by piece with their own hands. And so brother and sister weren't lonely, because the bones of their ancestors slept in the ground beneath their feet. And when they went to fish in the lake, they followed the footsteps of their father. And when they went to grind the grain at the millstone, their fingers fitted in the grooves worn by the hands of their mother. And when they sat on the wooden bench outside the hut at the end of the day, with their sandwiches of salmon and rye bread, sisters sliced in symmetrical segments, and brothers in great unwieldy hunks, with titbits given to the little red spit stork who sat between them at their feet. They knew that the eyes of their family for generations had looked out over that same still bright blue of the lake and tall, slender green of the forest. And they sat there every evening in a perfect, peaceful silence, because they were Finnish and they didn't do small talk. But one day, brother had to speak. He crammed his sandwich into his face and he said, "Woo, woo, woo, woo." She said, "What?" "I must speak. There is a burning inside of me." "Well, that's because you eat too quickly, brother. I've told you that before. No, it isn't that. At this time, do you ever think there's more than this? More than fishing in the lake, and grinding grain at the millstone, than giving tidbits to the little red dog? Well, there might be more than this, brother. I don't see what business it is of ours, but I want to make it my business. I have got a spirit, and I have got a spine. And though it is yet to be tested, I feel I may have a dazzling intellect. I want to go and seek my fortune. Well, if that's how you feel, brother, I will not hold you here. And so brother kissed sister goodbye. And then he said to the little red dog, old pal, old buddy, do you want to come with me and seek my fortune? And the little red dog, and then he jumped onto sister's knee and buried his face in her lap. And so brother left alone, but he wasn't lonely because he had his dreams to keep him company. And also the forest was chock-a-block full of mosquitoes. That were probably the great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren of the mosquitoes that had bothered his ancestors. And he went through the forest until he got to a village. And there was more in that village than there had been at home, but it wasn't enough for him. So he kept going until he got to a town. And there was more in the town than there had been in the village, but it wasn't enough for him, so he kept going until he got to the city. And in the city, there was everything. But he went past the butchers and the bakers and the tavern and the church and the shoemakers until he got to the castle of the king. And then he stopped. Because the castle of the king was weird. Really weird. It had a face carved in its stone walls that was alive. And that wasn't even the weirdest thing. Because you see, one half of that face had its mouth turned up in a big beaming smile on the whole side of the building, was rocking back and forwards with laughter, but the other side had its mouth turned down and it was shaking with sobs. Brother knocked on the door. And when it was opened by this man, half dressed in dark robes of mourning and half in bright, fancy party clothes, brother said, "What is going on with your castle?" "Right," said the man, "you see, okay, the thing is, we are very sad because the king has just died, but at the same time, we're really happy because the prince has come of age, we're going to get a new king, he'll get married soon, then we'll have a queen." To be honest with you, it is really confusing. "I see," said brother. "But it sounds to me like you might need an extra pair of hands. Allow me to introduce myself. I am a young man. And I have got a spirit and a spine, and though it is yet to be tested, I feel I may have a dazzling intellect. Have you got a job for me?" And the man at the door looked rather up and down and down and up and how are you with sheep? "I'm your man for sheep," said brother, and so he got a job as a shepherd. And it wasn't that it was bad, but it just wasn't what brother had imagined city life was going to be. Because in his mind's eye he'd seen himself consorting with the elegant men and women, engaging in the intellectual fireworks, but he wasn't even in the city bit. He was at the back, in the royal pastures. So nobody even spoke to him. And for the first time in Brother's life, he was lonely. I'm just going to try that again. For the first time in Brother's life, he was lonely. I should have made it really clear at the beginning, I am a very needy storyteller, especially these days. So yeah, I will just repeat it until I get what I mean. That was beautiful. Brother's life, he was lonely. So lonely. He missed sister. Thank you. You'd miss her too if she was your sister, he said to his favourite sheep. The one with the really sympathetic eyes, who's a very good listener. She is the best sister in the world. You should see her sandwiches. They're like works of art. And there's more to her than that. She is kind, and she is clever, and she is incredibly organised, and not to be weird about it, she's very pretty. I saw loads of girls go through the village and the town and now in the city, and I don't think any of them hold a candle to my sister. She looked sceptical. So Brother plucked a mushroom from the grass where he was sitting, and rather skillfully, with his fingernail, he drew a little picture of Sister's face. There you go. What do you think of that? Gorgeous, said the sheep, and Brother jumped out of his skin. And then he jumped back into it because he realised it hadn't been the sheep speaking. It was a young man emerging from the copse of trees behind the sheep. The young man dressed in radiant golden robes, but with black bands around his arms, wearing a golden crown that was just ever so slightly too big for him. I am the king of this land, said the king of this land. And I've been hiding myself in this copse of trees, you see, because, I'm just really sick of all these women they keep on bringing to me. Making them parade up and down in front of me. It's so embarrassing saying that I have to choose one to be my queen. I don't think I like any of them. I'm still rather sad that my father's just died. But now that I have seen that girl on that mushroom and heard all those wonderful things you were saying about her, I know that she, and only she, is the one for me. I will marry her. She will be queen, and when you bring her to me, there will be a special place for you in the castle. Well, Brother was overwhelmed. He bowed low to the king, and the king said, "Oh, don't. Oh, all right, if you want to." They shook hands. They embraced, and then Brother took off. He ran back through the city. He ran back through the town. He ran back through the village. He ran back through the forest. He skidded into the yard of the house as Sister was walking down to the lake to catch the fish for the day. The little red dog frisking around at her feet. And Brother said, "Sister!" And she said, "Brother!" And he said, "Let's go!" And she said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "The king! The king! The king, sister, the king!" "Yes, Brother. What about the king?" "The king is going to marry you. You are going to be queen. And when you are, there's going to be a special place for me in the castle." "What are you talking about? The king's going to marry me. The king doesn't know me. The king's never met me. I drew your picture on a mushroom." "What? I thought he was a sheep." "It's a long story, come on." And Brother grabbed Sister's arm, but Sister dug in her heels. She speared the fishing rod into the earth at her feet. She lifted her chin and she said, I am not going to marry some king, brother. I'm not going to leave our home for anyone or anything. I will never leave this place. Not until Father's fishing rod wears out from the fishing. Now catch some fish and stop being silly. And she went inside and she slammed the door. Well, that actually had not been the reaction Brother was hoping for. And he stared at Father's fishing rod. Well, that's not going to wear out anytime soon, is it? He said to the little dog. Look at it. It's really strong and woody. Oh, it's never going to break. You know, not even if I, bent it like this. Or like this. Or like... And the dog barked. And Sister ran out of the house and saw Brother standing there with the broken pieces of the fishing rod. I didn't mean it. I didn't. I promised you it was an accident. Though if you think about it, quite a coincidence. Because you just said, didn't you? And well, now it has, and shall we go? No. We shall not go. Because I'm not going to leave this house, brother. Not until Mother's millstone crumbles from the grinding. And she went inside and she slammed the door. What is her problem? Why doesn't she want to be queen? I would love to be queen. Sounds amazing. Mother's millstone crumbling from the grinding. Well, that's not going to happen anytime soon, is it? Look at it. It's really solid and stony. Oh, it's never going to break. Not even if I picked up this big and pointy rock and pounded it like this, or like that, or like... And the dog barked. And Sister ran out of the house and saw Brother standing there with the shattered pieces of the bedstone. I didn't mean it. Oh, God, I promise you it was an accident. But you've got to admit, bit of a sign. Because you just said, didn't you? And well, now it has, and shall we? No, she said. We shall not go. Because I am telling you, brother, that I am not going to leave this house until... And if she'd been a little bit less het up, she might have been a little less specific about what she said next, but she wasn't. So she was, until the lintel of the front door splits from the breeze of my passing through it, and she went inside and she slammed the door. And then she went into her bedroom and she slammed that door. And then she got into bed and she closed her eyes. And she dreamed of a golden crown hovering in the air above her head. It shone so brightly. Sister reached towards it, and then there was a man there too. And he had a crown on as well, and he was wonderful. And Sister reached towards him, and then there was a big crash, and she woke up. She got out of bed. She ran out of her room, and there was Brother, standing and staring up at the lintel above the front door, and surreptitiously kicking an axe away with his foot. What have you done? She said. And she passed through the door, she slammed it behind her, and Brother said, don't! But it was too late. Because as the door slammed, the lintel split. And as the lintel split, the wall crumbled. And as the wall crumbled, the ceiling caved, and brother and sister ran back as the house. And they stood and stared at the wreckage of the house of their ancestors, their faces and bodies white with wood dust. And brother, because he couldn't help it, thought to himself, you were only supposed to break the bloody lintel. But then sister stepped forward. She got on her knees. She scooped up a handful of earth from the ground, wrapped it in a handkerchief, slipped it underneath her shirt so it was close to her heart, and she looked up at brother. We can go, she said, because I see this house no longer holds me. She got to her feet. She lifted up the little red dog and she went and got in the boat. Come on then, she said. It will be quicker by sea. And brother got in after her. He untied the rope that tethered them to the shore. He lifted the oars. And they rowed away. And they rowed over the lake. And the lake became the sea. It was a little bit greyer, a little bit greener, a little bit rougher, a little bit wilder. Salt spray kicking up from the waves, stinging sister's cheeks as she shrank down in the boat, but the little red dog on her lap. He just thought everything was brilliant. And they rowed past a rocky island with a beach of clay grey. And standing in the centre of that beach, very tall and very still, was a woman with long straight hair as pale as ash and great dark eyes as grey as smoke. And when she saw them, she called, "Brother! Sister! Let me in your boat." "Oh," said brother, letting the oars go slack in his hands. "She looks nice. Should we let her in?" "I don't think that's a good idea, brother," said sister, as even from a distance she saw the woman's long bony toes wriggle in the clay like worms. So brother rowed on, around the other side of the island, but there she was again, like clambering over the rocks, her skirt all hitched up around her hips. "Oh, brother! Oh, sister, please! Please let me in your boat!" "Oh," said brother, "she really seems to want to get in the boat. Should we let her in?" "I don't think it's a good idea, brother," said sister, as she watched the woman's hair slither down her shoulders like snakes. So brother rode on, around the other side of the island, but somehow there she was again, huddled in a tiny little ball on the lip of the shore, sobbing and shaking. "Oh, brother! Oh, sister, please! Please let me in your boat!" "Oh," said brother, "look at her! She's really small and she's really sad. How can you be so hard-hearted?" And sister hesitated, only for a moment, but it was long enough for the boat to drift a little closer to the shore and for the woman to leap lightly and land between them. And now that she was in the boat, brother realised that she was a lot less sad and a lot less small than he had thought. In fact, she took up quite a lot of space. One arm snaked around brother's shoulders, one foot smushed up against sister's face. And what they didn't know she was Suyatan, the snake witch. So on reflection, not a great idea to let her in the boat. And she swiveled her face between them and said, "Oh, this is cozy. Where are we going?" Brother told her, on the way to the city, sister was going to be queen, special place for him in the castle. "Oh," she said, "that's exciting." And then she spat very fast into brother and sister's ears, so their heads were full of a buzzing, a droning like hundreds of mosquitoes, and they couldn't hear anything, and the little red dog growled from the floor of the boat, but Suyata, broke one of his legs. And he whimpered, but brother and sister couldn't hear. And then brother saw, over sister's shoulder, the shore of the city, with the castle, and the king, and all of the courtiers lined up waiting to meet them. And he said, "Quick, we're almost there. Tidy yourself up a bit." And sister saw brother's lips move, but she couldn't hear what he was saying, so she said, "What?" And Suyata turned to her, and she spoke in a voice that cut through the buzzing in sister's head. He says, "Take off your clothes and jump into the sea." And the little red dog growled, but a second leg. "Thank you." Don't know what I have to do to this dog to make him react. Don't push me. That's not where I want the story to go. No, he does. "Is that supposed to be funny?" said sister. "Is that one of your funny jokes?" And brother saw sister's lips move, but he couldn't hear what she was saying, so he said again, "Oh, come on, please, we're almost there, it's important." "He says," said Suyata, "take off your clothes and jump into the sea." And the little red dog growled again, but a third leg. And he fell with a thud to the floor of the boat, and sister lost it. She burst into tears and she said, "That is it. I have had enough. First of all, you storm in, shouting about some king, then you wreck the entire house, and now you are telling me to jump into the sea. I don't know who you are anymore." And brother couldn't hear what sister was saying, but he saw that she was getting upset. He said, "Oh, come on, please. Don't give me the waterworks. Just do this for me." "He says," said Suyata, "if you don't do it, he will do it for you." And sister got up. She ripped off her shirt. She pulled off her skirt. She kicked off her boots. She threw them at brother and she said, "I will go. But know this, it is broken between us." And brother heard that. A sister got onto the side of the boat and threw herself into the sea. He reached towards her, but Suyata pulled him back. She flung him down on the floor of the boat. She held him there with one bony finger and she said, "Oh, don't you worry, brother. I can be a bride." And she stepped in to sister's shoes. She pulled on sister's skirt. She slithered her arms into sister's shirt. She threw a little muddy handkerchief at brother before she did up the buttons. And as the wind picked up around them, and brother and the dog slumped on the floor, Suyata seized the oars and rowed them to shore. Now, the king had caused quite a stir a day or so ago when he'd run into the castle and told everybody that he was going to marry this girl he'd seen in the mushroom. All of his advisors had advised against it, but he had stamped his foot and held his breath and said he was the king now, the king, the king, the king, so they all had to do what he said, and so they had. The Archbishop was in the cathedral. The ladies in waiting held the dress and all of the citizens lined the streets to the shore. They were waving their flags and cheering. But when the woman stepped out of the boat, a hush fell upon the people in the crowd who were closest to her. Little mutterings began to rise up. One person said, "Oh, she's beautiful." But another said, "Ooh, she's a bit scary." Someone sighed, "Ah, her hair shines like snow." But another, "Her eyes burn like fire." And these mutterings reached the ear of the king. And he entertained inside of himself just the faintest flicker of uncertainty. And as the woman got closer and closer, that flicker fled, became a furnace of fucking hell. She did not look like that on the mushroom. He turned to his advisors, but they just pushed him forward, and so were the eyes of the city upon him. The king reached out his hands and said, "My bride?" And Theatre leapt lightly and landed by his side. She wound herself around him. She whispered in his ear, and if you'd been near enough, you might have noticed the king staggering a little where he stood. You might have seen this fog falling over his eyes, but what most people saw was him wrapping his arms around his bride-to-be and bringing her in for a passionate kiss, and so the crowd went wild! I'm just going to start saying that sentence in the middle of all stories. just when I need to pick me up. And then Theatre came up for air. She tossed back her ash blonde hair and she said, "Where's my dress?" And the ladies in waiting came, and they dressed her in silk and lace and silver and gold, and the king stood apart, shaking his head like there was water in his ears. And then he looked and he saw brother looking out to sea, pacing up and down. He strode over to him. He grabbed him roughly by the elbow and he said, You have done something that I don't like, Your Majesty. Said brother, please, you've got to listen to me. Don't answer back. Guards! And the guards came. And they grabbed brother's arms and legs and they dragged him down to the bowels of the castle as Suyatan walked down the aisle, holding white roses. But with every step she took, a petal withered and fell, so by the time she reached the king, she held only thorns. And as the guards heaved open a great trapdoor in the ground, the king placed a golden ring on Suyatar's finger. And as she seized his face between her hands and thrust her tongue inside his mouth, brother looked down, and he saw snakes and vipers writhing and hissing at the bottom of the pit, and as a golden crown was placed on Suyatar's head, the guards pushed brother, and he fell to darkness. And the sun set, turning the sea blood red, and the castle fixed its face into a rictus grin. And on the shore, in the boat, the little red dog lay still, barely breathing. But, such a good place for the but in the story. From the forest that grew to the east of the city, there was a bending back of branches and a rustling of leaves, and out stepped this old man. And he was really old.
He had as many lines on his face as there were rings around. The oldest trunk of the oldest tree, he walked over to the boat. He looked inside. And then he lifted the dog in his arms. And he carried him through the trees, deep into the heart of the forest where he had a little hut. And inside the hut, he bound splints to the dog's legs, gave him water to drink. He laid him on a blanket on the warmest part of the floor by the fire. And as the dog stirred, he feebly licked the man's wrinkled old hand with his pink tongue. Sister opened her eyes, and she was at the bottom of the sea. And it was very blue. It was. And light. And sparkly. And there was lush, green seagrass doing this. And pink and purple coral doing this. I've done many movement workshops, you see what I mean. And there was jellyfish bobbing, translucent, around her. Oh, and also there were women swimming in a great ring, their hair rippling, their breasts bobbing, and some of them had skin, and some of them had scales, and some of them had feet, and some of them had tails, and all of them wore these great, sweet smiles as they looked at Sister and said, "Who are you?" And Sister said, "I don't know anymore." And they laughed. And it was like tinkling of little silver bells. "Well, that's all right," they said. "Be one of us." And so she was. She swam with the seagulls. And she danced on golden sand with the seagulls. She herded sea cows with the seagulls. You know what sea cows are? They're like cows, but they're in the sea. They brushed each other's hair. They shone each other's skin and scales, and they slept overlapping. So you couldn't see where one of them ended and the other began, and there were men there too. And the men were very pretty. They had strokey eyelashes. They had silky hair. They had pouty lips, and one of them wore a twinkling silver crown. Because even though, officially there was no hierarchy under the water, there also sort of was a bit. And the unofficial sea prince and Sister swam together, holding hands. They swam together holding hands. They danced together on golden sand, holding hands. They herded sea cows together, holding hands, and Sister said, "Oh, they're just like cows, but they're in the sea." So romantic. They brushed each other's hair. They shone each other's skin and scales, and he kissed her. Ooh. Yes. Sweetly, softly, politely, asking her permission every single time. And it was so nice. But it was a bit annoying after a while. And though most of Sister's body drifted in towards him, her heels stuck in the sand. And the sea prince noticed. "What are you doing?" "I'm thinking about my brother." He stopped his nose. "Why?" "I miss him." "Oh,
He was stupid. God, he is so stupid, but he's also sweet and brave and funny, sometimes actually on purpose. I have to go and see him. I have to mend what has been broken between us. But your brother's dead. The king threw him to the vipers and the snakes. What? It's good. He was bad. Why are you crying? There's no crying here. There's no sadness here. There's no badness here. Come, have a swim. Have a dance too. Look at the sea cows. They're like cows, but they're in the sea. But sister wouldn't stop. She cried and cried, even though the water of the sea washed her tears from her cheeks as fast as they fell. My brother is dead. My brother is dead. It is my doing. I have to go and see the king. I have to beg him for brother's body, for his bones, at least so I can bury them properly. You understand, don't you? Oh, sure, said the sea prince and all the sea people. We understand. You know, because we are very understanding. Of course you can go. You just have to wear these. And they brought forward silver chains. And they wound them around Sister's wrists and Sister's ankles. You can go up 3 times. That's how nice we are. But when we put on the chains, you must come back down, and after the 3rd time, well, then you will stay with us forever. Movement. Sister rose from the water and stepped onto the shore. But she couldn't go any further because those silver chains held her tight. She pulled and she struggled with all of her strength, but they just cut deeper into her skin, and she cried again in frustration. But when her tears touched the ground, they turned as white and as round as the moon in the sky above her head. And those pearls that gathered at her feet, they rolled out over the shore, all the way to the edge of the forest, where there was a bending back of branches and a rustling of leaves, and sniffing, snorking, snuffling, out stepped the little red dog. And when he saw Sister, his tail wagged back and forwards and forwards and back, and he ran, limping a little but still pretty fast. He leapt into her arms, he writhed about, he did that thing that dogs do, you know, when they're so excited. They practically turn themselves inside out, and she said, oh, my friend. Oh, my friend, I'm so happy to see you. I am so sorry I left you and the dogs. Now it's all right. Because he could always talk. I thought to mention it before. You are back now, and that is good. Because everything here is bad. The king doesn't govern. Him and the queen just drink and feast all day. Nobody works. So the meat rots stinking in the kitchen, and the castle reeks every night because nobody tends to it. Well, that isn't good, said Sister. But that isn't why I'm here. I'm only here for brother's body, for his bones, so I can bury them properly, please, my friend, because I can't go any further. Would you take a pearl to the king for me? See if it will convince him to release brother's bones. I will come again tomorrow. And as the chains dragged Sister back into the water, the dog picked up a pearl between his teeth, and he went into the castle.
And the security was so lax at the moment, he was able to go right in. All the way to the royal bedchamber, where the king lay, pale and clammy, his hair stuck to his forehead with sweat. And around him, wound tight as a vice, was Suyata, sleeping in her true shape, skeletal, with a bulbous belly, scaly and slimy with teeth and claws and little red dots. He trembled when he saw her, but he steeled himself. He went up to the bed, he dropped the pearl on the king's pillow, and then he got out of there as quick as he could. The king woke up late, as usual, with a foggy head and that tacky tongue, which was also pretty usual. And this weird, like slimy stuff on his skin that was just getting way too usual. And then he saw the pearl on his pillow, and he wondered at it. It shone so brightly. "What's that?" said his wife, plucking it from his fingers and tossing back her ash blonde hair. "I don't know," said the king. "It was just there. I don't know who it's from." "Me, of course." "Really? Well then, why did you ask me what it was?" "I was teasing you, silly boy. That's what couples do. Who else is going to get you presents while you lie there snoring?" "No one." "Thank you." And as his wife stalked off to start the day's drinking, the king had that pearl made into a pin. He fastened it to his shirt, but as soon as he did, this pain, it struck him right through his chest. It was excruciating. It brought tears to his eyes, and as he blinked them back, it was like his vision cleared. The fog lifted from his mind, and he suddenly remembered that young man that he'd had thrown to the vipers and snakes on his wedding day. He had completely forgotten about him. So he called out, "God!" Because it was just the one guard now. All of the other guards were getting pissed with his wife. And in fact, this guard had retired. He'd served the king's father for many years, and he'd only recently stepped back into service. He was very old. He had as many lines on his skin as there were rings around the oldest trunk of the oldest tree, and if the king was honest, he was quite intimidated by him. But he wasn't going to admit it, so he said, "Oh yes, I'm a good man. Please, no, not please, go and inspect the snake pit for me. I just want to check there's nothing too, disgusting down there." "Your Majesty." And after the guard had gone, the king noticed that his bedroom floor was all sticky, and there were grimy cobwebs in the corners of the ceiling, and the bed sheets were not good. So he just tried, to straighten a couple of things out. "But what are you doing?" His wife stood in the doorway with a glass of dark red wine in her hand. She sashayed over to him. She wrapped herself around him. She tipped the glass to his lips, and the king drank. And the king drank. And the king drank, and the wine dribbled sticky down his chin, and he drank until he didn't give a shit about bed sheets or cobwebs or snake pits, and together they tumbled into bed and into darkness. Sister rose the second night and stepped onto the shore. She pulled, she struggled with all of her might, but those silver chains held her fast. The air seemed thinner to her now, It was harder to breathe. She cried again, tears turned into pearls at her feet. Their little red dog ran to greet her. "Oh, it's so good that you're back! Because everything here is worse. Nobody governs, so the city is corrupt. Judges take bribes in the courthouses. The innocent are punished and the guilty walk the streets laughing. Well, that is bad," said Sister. But what can I do? And that isn't why I'm here. I'm only here for Brother's body, for his bones so I can bury them properly. Please, my friend, take another pearl to the king for me. See if it will convince him. I can come once more tomorrow, but not again. The second pearl was larger. It was even more luminous than the first. The king had it threaded on a fine golden chain. He hung it around his neck, but as soon as it touched his skin, that pain, it was back, it pierced him, right through the heart. And again, he suddenly remembered the young man, the snake pit, the guard. "Your Majesty, you didn't, report back to me yesterday. Your Majesty was occupied." "Oh, right. Well, is everything all right? Down there?" "Your Majesty must see for himself." "Oh, well, I mean, surely there's no need for that. I mean, you could just tell me, couldn't you? Your Majesty must see for himself." And so the king followed the guard down to the bowels of the castle, and he watched as the guard heaved open a great trapdoor, and the king looked in. And then he sprang back. He slammed the trapdoor shut. He turned to the guard and he said, "Slap me." "I will not do that, Your Majesty. I am your king. I command you to slap me." And so the guard raised a meaty palm, and he slapped the king so hard around his face the king did a little spin. He lifted the trapdoor open. He looked down and he shouted, "Why aren't you dead?" "Oh," said Brother, cheerily waving up at the king. "Now that is an excellent question, Your Majesty. If you come down, I'll tell you." And so the guard threw a heavy rope into the pit, and the king climbed down. When he got to the bottom, all the snakes and the vipers writhed and hissed. But Brother said, don't worry, they don't bite. I mean, they do bite, but you won't, will you?" And all of the little snakes shook their heads, which meant no, we won't bite. Sit down, said Brother, just to, kick the rat carcasses out of the way. Sorry, some of the smaller snakes can't digest too well. And as the king sat down on the cold stone floor, he saw that all the little snakes coiled themselves up really neatly, and the largest snake wrapped itself around Brother's arm and rested its hooded head on Brother's shoulder. "Right," said Brother. "Well, when you guards pushed me into this pit, I pretty much thought that was it. But then, this handkerchief I had on me from my sister, filled with earth from our family home, broke open. The earth fell in a perfect circle on the ground. I landed in the middle of it, and none of the snakes would cross it." "Why not?" said the king. "Ancestors' blessing," said the hooded snake. "Oh," said the king. "You can talk." "Obviously," said the hooded snake. "Well, when I realised that the snakes wouldn't cross the earth, I broke it open with my own hands, didn't I? Yes. And I ripped over my shirt, didn't I? Yes. And I said, 'Strike me, kill me now, I deserve to die, I've done a terrible thing.' 'What had you done?' said the king. And Brother told him everything that had happened to him and sister on the boat, and as the king listened, turned white and green and then white again. So I am not married to your sister, he said. No, said brother, because my sister is dead. And he hung his head and wept. And the hooded snake brushed the tears from his cheeks with his forked tongue. The woman that shares your bed, he said, is Suyata, the snake witch. Well, now that you say it, that does make sense. Because everything has been really strange since I got married. And it's getting stranger every day. And he told brother and the snake about the pearls. They are not from Suyata. And I must find out who they are from. But be careful. If she finds out that you know who she truly is, her vengeance will be horrible. I was once a king like you, and I crossed her, and she cursed me. Oh, so you haven't always been a snake? No, I was once a man. Right. What about these ones? Were they men too? No, they're just snakes. No offense. And all of the little snakes waggled their tails, which meant no offense taken. But when he got halfway, he said, do you want to come up or stay down there? Wouldn't mind having something to eat that wasn't regurgitated rat carcass. Of course. And so the king and brother and the king snake around brother's shoulders all climbed up the rope to where the guard was keeping watch. And they told the guard everything they had found out. And when the guard heard, he said, right, well, now that you say it, that does make sense. These are strange times. The people are disturbed. They talk of strange sights. They say a woman rises from the sea every night and weeps, her tears shining like the moon. I must speak to her, said the king. Your Majesty, let me go. It could be dangerous. No, it must be me. Then take this. And the guard took a knife from his belt, and he gave it to the king, telling him that it had been his father's, who'd given it to the guard before he died with his blessing, and asked him to give it to the young king when he was ready to use it. So he didn't think I was ready before. You are ready now. And the king unsheathed the knife, and it gleamed silver in the gloom. And then the snake king spat, and the venom sparked and smoked on the blade, and the king swore an oath that from that moment on, he would do everything in his power to deserve his father's blessing. And then he told the guard to tell his wife that he had been called away on royal business. Or maybe he was on a crawl of the local taverns, because that was probably going to be more believable. And then he asked him to take brother and the king snake somewhere warm and safe, and the guard took them to his hut, deep in the heart of the forest, as the king walked to shore. And he waited, his knife in his hand, that was only trembling a little. And then the waters stirred, and sister rose, the moonlight shining on her skin, her hair falling soft over her face and her breasts and her belly, the silver chains tinkling like bells as she stepped onto the shore. And when the king saw her, he knew her right away. But when she saw him, she spat, she bared her teeth, she strained against the chains, and she said, "Murderer! Murderer! You killed my brother!" And the king said, "Yes, I know, I am so sorry, I tried. But you have to believe me. Your brother is alive." And he told sister everything that brother had told him. And when sister realized brother was alive. She cried. Just like she'd done when she thought he was dead. And the king saw her tears turn into pearls at her feet. And he said, "Oh, it is you. You have saved me. You have helped me so much. I am begging you, please, stay with me. I am begging you, please, be with me." But she said, "Why should I? You don't deserve to wear that crown. You have made the people sick. You have made the land sick. I know I have, and I regret it. But I have sworn an oath tonight, and I will swear it again in front of you that from this moment on I will do everything in my power to mend what I've broken, to deserve my place. But what will you do? Just turn your back and disappear? That isn't fair," she said. "I don't have a choice." And she lifted her arms and showed him the chains. "And anyway, you don't know me. You never knew me. You could never hold me." And as she spoke, the chains pulled her back, and the water began to swallow up her body. But then the king leapt forward and the knife sliced through the chains like they were butter. Fell now from Sister's wrists and Sister's ankles, and Sister screamed and leapt into the air as the king threw his arms around her waist, and she became a bear. I know! But the king held on as she roared in his face, and then she became an eagle with great wings that beat. But the king held on as she became a fish that slipped between his fingers. But the king held on as she became a burning hot coal that blistered his palm. But the king held on as she became a wolf, and then a lynx, and then a lizard, and then a spindle, and then she started changing. So fast, so furiously, he couldn't even see what she was anymore, but he held on, and he held on, and he held on until she was herself. And they fell together, half onto the shore and half in the sea, their bodies bruised and blistered and burnt. And as the sun showed itself over the line of the horizon, Sister's arms reached out and wrapped themselves around the king. "All right," she said. "I see that you can hold me." And then they kissed.
Aww.
They were really sweet. And then they kissed a little bit more, a little less sweet, a little bit rougher, a little more passionate. And then Sister sat up suddenly, and she said, "I need a pail of vodka, a guard's uniform, and 3 barrels full of tar." Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. You're going to have to walk me through it. It's not for us. It's for Suyita. We still have to kill the witch. Oh yeah. How? Like this. And so Sister and the king, they went to the Subble sauna, the smoke sauna that was built on the edge of the forest in front of the sea. Now the smoke sauna is the old type of Finnish sauna, without a chimney. So it's important when you're heating it up to leave the door open ever so slightly, otherwise things can get explosive. But after Sister lit the stove, she slammed the door tight shut as the king and the guard dug a pit between the sauna and the sea, and they filled that pit with tar. And over the top of it they spread a fine green cloth. They sprinkled grass and leaves. A Sister dressed herself in a guard's uniform, pulling a hood low over her head, and she stood in front of the pit, holding a pail brimming with vodka. The guard went to the castle, and he told Suyita that her husband was back from his royal business tavern crawl, and he was waiting for her in the sauna. And as she followed him down, tossing back her ash blonde hair, she said, "I hope they heated it up enough.
Because you know, I like it hot. It's all been prepared as it should be for you. Have they sprinkled water on the stones and purified the air? It has all been prepared as it should be for you. Have they swept the soot from the benches and the floor? It has all been prepared as it should be for you. Where's my husband? Waiting. And Theodore flung open the sauna door. And as she did, that fresh air rushed in, and it mingled with all the fumes and the smoke, and whoop! Flames leapt out like fingers. They snatched at her hair and at her face, and Theodore spun round, screaming, calling towards the young guard standing there with a pail of water. Put me out! Put me out! But Sister drew back her hood, and she threw the pail of vodka over Theodore's head, just as her feet touched the cloth over the pit, and she went up as she plunged down. And there's actually a saying in Finnish that roughly translated comes to, if sauna, vodka and tar can't cure it, nothing can. And Sister and the guard and the king who'd been hiding behind the sauna all stood and looked down at the smoke curling up from the pit, and then Sister cried out. She grabbed the knife from the king's belt, because coming from the forest through the trees was slithering this great green hooded snake. She ran towards it, but then brother, his arms flailing, his legs flailing, came running from the trees. He dropped to his knees, he wrapped his arms around the snake, and he said, "Oh, please, please don't hurt my snake." And Sister looked at brother on his knees, hugging a snake. And brother looked at Sister, dressed in a guard's uniform, holding a knife. And then she dropped the knife. He let go of the snake. And they ran to each other. And they held one another. And they laughed. And they cried. And they, "I'm sorry." And they forgave. And as the last burning ember of Suyata's body crumbled to ash, that snake's skin split. And out stepped a beautiful, naked, glistening young man who was sculpted everywhere. And him and brother embraced. And Sister and the king embraced. And the guard dropped to his knees and whistled, and out from the trees came running the little red dog, and him and the guard embraced. Oh. And then Sister said, "We have to go back to the castle, because there is so much to do," and the king said, "There is." And he turned to the guard and said, "Will you come?" But the guard... So the king thanked him once again for his service. And Sister turned to the little red dog and she said, "Little red dog, do you want to come and live with me in the castle?" And the little red dog, and then he buried his face into the guard's shoulder. And so Sister and the king and brother and the beautiful naked young man all walked back through the city to the castle as the guard and the dog turned. And they made their way into the heart of the forest, to the hut. And the guard sat down on the wooden bench, the dog nestled at his feet. And he let his eyes rest on the earth and the trees, and the sunlight sprinkled through the branching, and for a moment there was a perfect peaceful silence, as in the city, to the sound of cheers
A golden crown was placed on Sister's head, and the stone face of the castle shivered, softened, and started slowly and a little shyly to give the beginnings of a smile. Thank you.
Pool in front of me and the bird sitting there. I'm not sure I should go on an adventure.
No, just stay there and eat sandwiches.
Stay there and eat my sandwiches. No secret.
Yeah, you slice those sandwiches.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
I think let's all take that from that story.
Anyway, my mind is just completely blasted with that imagery. It's fantastic progression from something very calm to something very wild, particularly the